Hi, this is Michael Drury, and I am here with one of our resident designers for Pandora Productions. And you've seen his name in programs for years and years. And hopefully during this interview, we'll find out how many years, because I can't remember. And this is Jesse AlFord, who is our magnificent lighting designer. And I'm thrilled for you to actually get to see his sweet face. Jesse, you came from California, right?
Yes.
And I'm hoping also to coax him into telling us a little bit more about his life with the circus. I'm sure that's an intriguing story. And I think I can probably share, because he's been sharing, that he and his wife will be new parents in January. This is my day and my show to have new parents, because I just interviewed Andrew earlier this afternoon with his twin. So Jesse, why don't you start us out and just tell us a little bit more about your background, where you're from, and I know our audience will be intrigued about your life with the circus.
Totally. Yeah, I grew up in Redlands, California, which is in Southern California. And I was lucky enough to grow up in a city that had a youth circus program. So I grew up participating in circus in the same way that everybody else I knew played soccer after school and did theater or anything else. So, Mondays and Wednesdays were unicycle class, and Tuesdays and Thursdays were acrobatics. And I did that all through high school. And then I went to college in Washington State. I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. Then I took chemistry and decided against that. And I had a bit of a mid-college identity crisis, realizing I wasn't sure if I was totally done with circus. I took some time off and moved to San Francisco. Worked with a whole bunch, like I trained at the San Francisco Circus Center. I worked for Circus Bella, the Zope Family Circus, and I interned with the American Youth Circus Organization. And really that just solidified, I still want to do this with my life in some capacity. And I'm going into this much detail in the story because it's totally related to how I ended up in theater. And so I went back to school, still back to Washington State University, just to finish there, because I had the time and the money if I could fit it into that 4-year window, and switched to theater, thinking that technical theater was also technical circus. And that was a way that I could get a degree to be safe and still have the ability to run away with the circus. And then I had a fantastic professor, Ben Gonzalez, who is now in Missouri. I believe, I don't know exactly what school, somewhere in central Missouri. And I would probably be doing whatever it was that he taught. It just happens that he taught lighting. And I fell into theater halfway through college. I was 20 years old when I fully appreciated theater. I had gone to theater as a kid. My parents would take me to shows and stuff, but I do not have the relationship with theater that so many of my peers do, where they grew up loving certain musicals. There are key cultural components in theater that I am unaware of or haven't seen or I'm playing catch up on. And so now I have this, if I'm not doing lighting design, I'm a circus coach. And so I teach in Cincinnati and here in Louisville. Those two worlds mean that I also get a fair amount of work designing for circuses, like Circus Flora in St. Louis and the Big Apple Circus in New York.
Yeah.
I think that connects all the dots to where we are today.
Yes. And you teach in Cincinnati, right?
Yes. I'm the head coach for My Nose Turns Red Youth Circus in Cincinnati.
Yeah. And you came to Louisville via Actors Theater as an intern, right?
I got the lighting apprenticeship. Back then it was an internship. Now it's an apprenticeship. And so I didn't know anything about Louisville, discovered Louisville thinking that we'd move out here for 9 months of an internship. Star came along thinking 9 months, explore a new city. That's great. It's now been 10 years and we love it here.
Jesse's wife, Star, is also a theater artist. She stage manages, she does, what all does she do in theater?
stage management is like her primary thing, but she is somebody who grew up doing, like, she did theater in high school. She has that cultural vocabulary of theater that I don't have, or I'm still building. But yeah, she's primarily a stage manager, but she has played all the roles of lighting technician and co-lighting designer with me. We've designed and built sets together. She's she's done a lot of costume work as well, costume design and technician there also. But stage
Yeah.
management is her big thing.
Usually when I see Star is either at Jesse and Star's Christmas drinky drinks and sneaky snacks party, or I'll go into the theater and Jesse will have her hoisting really heavy lights up on a rope. So yes, what you do sometimes involves heavy lifting and going up on a very tall ladder and dealing with heavy objects that you also have to carry up ladders or hoist up on ropes. Because I've helped with that myself, and it's not easy work. It's labor.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Now, how long have you been with Pandora? Please refresh my memory. I just feel like I get people and I just hang on to them and until they're ready to leave. And I don't really know how long you've been.
Sneaky look it up while we were talking, but I forgot. And I don't think I have the poster. My first show with Pandora was Cock, directed by J.R. Berard. And
Yes.
soon after that was Edith Can Shoot Things and Hit Them.
Yes.
I think those were roughly in the same season, and
they were
my first season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they followed one another. Neil was in Cock and he directed Edith, and I think that was I think that was 14-15 season. Does that sound right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
16-17 was, or 15-16. No, 16-17 was Hedwig. Mm-hmm. The end of, and that season, and then the next year, oh, I don't know. It all runs together. See, it was 16-17 because we won, I won Best Director and we won Best Play for the Nance with the Broadway World Awards, and Hedwig followed the Nance. And I think that Edith and Cock were the year before that. So that must have been 15-16.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. I just went through a whole bunch of organizing, and you'd think I'd have this stuff on the top of my head, especially the last 5 years, but no, it doesn't stay. It doesn't stay.
I do keep a master list just for my own records and I organize it by year, but I wasn't fast enough in digging that up to answer this question.
Yeah, so. That's all right. I did not give Jesse the questions beforehand. I think probably most interviewers probably give you some idea what they're going to ask. So sorry to spring all that on you. I've found myself when I do these interviews for our audience having more of a conversation than really asking formal questions. So this is really just like you and me shooting the breeze more than it is. I just want our audience to get to know you and see your cute face. So the next thing I was going to ask you was if anything, you know, you have a wide variety of experience, and now you light for the orchestra, you've lit for the ballet, you light for a bunch of people. So we feel very fortunate to have you in our season. But is there, I think our audience would be curious to know how, what the differences are for lighting for those big organizations and what they are for Pandora. And, you know, if there are any differences that just really stand out to you.
Yeah. It's a tricky question because when we talk about here locally, the big organizations specifically that we just named, there's also like a different goal, right? The ballet is strictly dance and the orchestra is strictly music with much, everybody has very specific needs from lighting. And so that's the biggest difference, but that has nothing to do with organizations or even scale. But what I appreciate about working for Pandora amongst all of the companies and disciplines that I work in is there's always a very clear purpose or reason for the story that we are telling, and there's and even if we are doing a show that feels like it is strictly fun, like my Big Gay Italian Christmas,
Right.
any show like that, there's still importance and value in putting those characters on stage, and it is not just strictly fun. It like plays a role in spreading a message that is absent in a lot of other art, and so that's what I appreciate comparing Pandora to other organizations. But then the other stark difference is like I do all of the lighting work myself at Pandora until I hand the show off to a stage manager, or with the exception if like you or Star are helping me haul heavy lights around. It's all me, which lends a level of intimacy from my end in the sense that I am present for every part of the process. It is not the show is not so large that I have to delegate things. Like I don't have to say, hey assistant, you go to this rehearsal because I have to solve this technical thing, or even vice versa. I'm present for all of it, and I appreciate that. I think that goes hand in hand really well with telling stories that have a need to be told.
Right, right. So you do have assistants on shows for the bigger organizations.
Sometimes, totally depends on the show. But even then, it's not just an assistant for me. It's that like a theater might have a staff,
Gotcha.
or that it takes 10 union electricians to load in the lighting for a ballet show. They're not working directly for me. That's just what it takes to hang that many lights. And for Pandora, in a friendly space like the Henry Clay, where we all share a rep plot for the most part, it means that I can do all of that work, and it means that I've touched all the pieces of that show, and that is nice.
Yeah, and some of our audience probably don't know that there are theaters where the lights stay in the grid all the time, and there are theaters where they come down after every show, and so that's a lot of work. We've done plenty of shows at the Mex where we had to strike the grid after every show. That means that the theater company coming in behind us, or us coming in behind somebody else, have to hang all those instruments. I am here to tell you they come down a lot faster than they go up.
Yes. It's a blessing and a curse, but in a space like the Henry Clay where the seating doesn't move, there are definitely lighting positions that can stay, and it's helpful to everyone. In the Mex, seats move around all over the place. You can do whatever you want, so it makes a little more sense to strike it all there.
Yeah, I have to say that I love that the lights stay in the air at the Henry Clay because I hate striking the grid. I just don't like it.
Yeah.
And it is an all hands on deck kind of thing when it happens, because it just takes a long time to do. Yeah. So let's see. So I'm curious about, and I think our audience would love to know about your process for lighting a show. So take, for example, the one we just finished, Buyer Cellar. So you had said to me when we first got in the theater that you were still sort of wrestling with what it looked like and where we were, because we go to different locations theoretically, even though the set is sort of abstract and is multi-purpose for all of the locations. I, as a director, wanted different looks for the different places that we landed. And that seemed a little nebulous. And in this season, when we're dealing with COVID, we're not getting together for production meetings. We're doing those more online via email, which works, I think, for the most part for these shows. They're smaller on scale. But there is a lot to be said for being in a room with a whole design team and the visionary director, because there are lots of probing questions that could then be asked, and other people chime in and say, I don't get that, I don't understand that, and really sort of hold the director accountable for their concept and their vision, right? Which I actually love because it's like creating all over again when you get into the room. You have all these things in your head until you get in the room with the designers, and they're like, "Really? I don't think that's possible." "Really? I wonder if there's a better way." Which I actually really love. So tell us about the process, and I think use buyer and seller as an example
Sure.
for how you work through a show.
Yeah. Obviously, first I read the show, but I think what is not obvious if you've not done that process is I definitely read the show without doing any other research or looking it up or anything. If we hadn't like talked about this at all, then like I wouldn't have known that Barbara Streisand was a component of this story before like opening the script.
Okay.
I didn't know this show ahead of time, but I try really hard for that first read to be without other input. And then it's really just a lot of trying to get the rest of the creative team's ideas in my head. And that is like, for a show like this, it is as simple as like reading everybody's emails and hoping that other people are replying all and not just keeping it isolated with you. I'm guilty of thinking like, oh, they don't want to read my email, but
right.
So I reply just to you, but I totally want to hear the questions that the costume designer's asking and stuff like that. Because this is, I enjoy theater because it is collaborative. And so my favorite parts of the process are when there are questions across departments, when the costume designer is saying, I thought it was nighttime here, Jesse, lighting designer. It's clearly noon in the world that you've built.
Right.
Like those, I love those things. And even like that example is like pointing out a note, but also just being able to say to a costume designer, like, it'd be cool if they had a cape. It'd be really cool. Just like that collaboration is why I enjoy this work. And so that is what is different in this COVID specific theater. Those conversations are changed and they're still happening, but they're digital. For this show, for Buyer and Seller, it was difficult for me just because I am, I tend to come down more on the realistic side of how we picture things. I really enjoy theater and moments within theater that have a reason for being. It's kind of like why in the musical world, I am a fan of musicals that just have a justification for why people are singing, instead of just breaking into song. That's not to say that there aren't plenty of good shows where people just break into song. But I appreciate the shows that are at least centered around a story like a nightclub or something. And so this show, Buyer and Seller, that at its core is an actor telling a story, and they just say up front, none of this is real. That's not the line, but it's something to...
I think that is actually the line.
And so it was difficult for me to figure out, like, why are we going to visually jump to all of these places? And sometimes that answer is a blunt, like, we're going to over-design this. We're going to ignore the reality of this, and we're really going to push into that. And I just had a difficult time getting totally on board with your vision of this. And I think that's just a symptom of doing this all digitally. Like, I totally heard everything you were saying in the emails and in our conversations. And so it was interesting for it to be difficult in that way, is really all I mean by that. I appreciate where we landed, but I think that in a different environment, I would have been able to take those visual looks farther. Right now, the changes in the lighting in this show are functional and they are focus pulling and mood shifting and not at all literal in the sense of like, oh, now we're outside or now we're in an apartment. Those aren't there, but the changes are. And it'd be interesting to see in a parallel universe what this show looks like with the same team, but without a pandemic.
Yeah, and or with a different director with a different vision. And I appreciated that you came into the in-person part of the rehearsal process, and said, I'm not really sure I get what we're doing here, you know, because it made me think, do I know what I'm doing here? um, and, you know, made me really have to verbalize where I was, right? And I clearly hadn't communicated that very well in our digital communication. So, you know, I just appreciate that about our team. You know, we all ask questions and we all say, I don't get that. You know, I don't know where that's coming from. You know,
Yeah.
And I certainly don't mind being called to answer those kinds of things, because I want it to all gel visually and orally for everyone. And I want everybody to be able to see the show and hear the show that I've had in my head for a while, right? Because I've seen it from concept. So, you know, and if it's not making sense to you all, it's not going to make sense to an audience, ultimately.
Yeah. I think if I had spent more time looking through the images from that book, from my passion for design, then I would have understood more of where we were landing. Like, there is an embarrassment of riches at the core of this story, and I was not designing from an embarrassment of riches perspective. And that's a thing that I realized well into our tech week, that would have helped push me towards your vision.
Huh. And what was that moment that made that happen for you?
I'm not sure. Maybe just like finally being done enough with the show. Like, I was done looking at the computer and was able to look at and think about all of the images in the video work, in the slides.
Yeah.
And being able to listen more fully to Andrew deliver those lines, and think about what it would be like to stand in Barbara Streisand's dining room, listening to her describe where she got every single piece of cherry glass. Cherry glass? Red glass. Cranberry. Yeah, there we
go. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Cool. But you, so I think I'm hearing you say that that you would have probably taken this farther if we'd had more time, or had more in-person conversations ahead of Tech Week, or what am I hearing you say? I'm paraphrasing you badly.
No, I think you're totally right. And the reason I feel that way is that if I had been saturated with that imagery, and like, if we had just had more conversations about the ridiculousness of Barbara Streisand,
right.
then that is what would have helped. And I was spending too much time on my own reading the script and reading the, like, I think, oddly placed lighting cues in the stage directions, thinking, this isn't right. This isn't a full-blown show with 18 locations. This is an actor telling a story. And I was missing the Barbara Streisand component of this, which is an embarrassment of riches. And so if we'd had more conversations, if we were passing that book around a table at a coffee shop, that would have changed how I perceived this story.
Yes. So which sort of leads me to the last few questions I have, which are primarily about COVID. So that is one way that our business, our interactions as a team has changed. Zoom is limited. A digital email is even more limited. You know, we all know each other pretty well, and we can hear inflections in tone, I think, in our typed words. But, you know, even on a Zoom recording, I don't know how much of that book I would have held up and shown people. But it also sort of informs me about, oh, that is a component I really missed. Like, I could have found a way probably to have shared those images with you all had I even thought for a moment that would help you in some way, right? Like, it didn't even occur to me. I don't know why. I mean, it would have occurred to me if we'd had an in-person production meeting, a concept meeting, to bring that book and pass it around. That would have occurred to me.
But it also did
Right.
not at any point occur to me that I should go look for that book at the library or something. I did very
Ah,
minimal Googling around about the book. But that's
uh-huh.
like the whole show is basically about the book in a
It is
way.
about the book.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I should have just bought the book, especially hearing Andrew say that it was like only $14 or something.
Right.
I can buy
He
that.
must have had millions of copies printed. I mean, it's big. It's huge. It's this big, big,
Yeah.
thick book. And it is gorgeous. I will recommend it highly to people because especially if you dig Barbara Streisand, I mean it is as quirky and as weird as you might imagine that she is. But I mean, I think she wrote every single word of it, and I think the character in the play says something like, "I enjoyed reading your book because it sounds like you talking," and I really feel like that's very true. And a lot of the play comes from the text of the book. It's astonishing how much comes from the text of the book. Um, so I highly recommend it if you're the least bit interested in Barbara Streisand and her passion for design and her house and her barn and her mall and her mill. She does in fact run a mill because it is really quite stunning and fun to read, and it is not very expensive. So um, yeah, so we talked about that and COVID. I suspect that we're going to be um, at least doing what we've been doing for the last two shows, at least for the next show, and probably for the next two. Um, so what the audience may not know is that we take all kinds of precautions. So one of the reasons that we're doing one-person shows this season, I've said before, but it bears repeating, is so that I can rehearse with an actor and have as few people in the room to potentially be infectious to one another as possible. And the actors and I rehearse on Zoom for several weeks. They go away, kind of learn their lines, and then we get together and we quickly block or choreograph the movement of the show. And then we come into the space and we put the technical elements, all the design elements around what the actor and I have created together. And the actor is maskless on the stage, but all of the design team is in the house and they all have masks on. So I think the last thing I sort of want to talk about is how has that worked for you, us, being masked, and how has it affected the process for you? Um, I remember after the first night we were in for the last show, um, that first night we were all kind of subdued, I felt like. And I know for myself, I left that night feeling a little unsatisfied. Now that's not an unusual feeling for me because I'm trying to take everything that's been in my head and put it on the stage, right? So I often feel unsatisfied the first couple of nights of tech rehearsal. But that night it was different because we were in masks, we weren't close to each other. Theater people, by and large, are a very touchy-feely, huggy people. And we weren't able to do that. We were afraid to be close to each other, it felt like to me. And that just made me sad. But I had to sort of be with, okay, this is how I'm feeling about this. And the next night, I just kind of shared that with everybody. And I said, this is just kind of how I was last night. And I just want to put that out there to be complete about it so I can move on. And I don't want to have that feeling tonight. And everybody was like, oh my God, we felt like that too.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to like separate the am I sad or am I learning this new reality? And I've had a lot of moments where I've had that experience, like this feels sad, or like I don't want to be here, but really I'm just in the middle of some emotional work to figure out how to do this.
how to be there, how to be in that feeling, yeah, and sit in it and still do your work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. So we've been doing that, and so I just want to just get your feelings about how that works and if it affects your process, and then you know, what are you most looking forward to post COVID?
Um, for how like for how it affects my process and everything, it oddly, for the shows that we are able to do in this new normal, it doesn't affect my process too much because we're doing one-person shows that are ultimately relatively simple, or if there's something complex about them, it's fewer people that I have to work with, right? If it's one crazy lighting effect, it's one actor that I have to sort that out with.
Right.
And being simple means that I have to rely, like I don't need as many people to help me get the show ready to go, anything like that. So because we're doing these simple shows, my process hasn't changed that much. It is, what I miss is feeling more free to just pop into the rehearsal hall. Like sometimes if we're doing a larger show, I will come to multiple rehearsals, or certainly want to come to multiple rehearsals. I can't always swing it for the shows that need it. But I want to see multiple runs before we're in the theater in Tech Week. And I'm very present now, or very aware currently about my presence in a room and if it's a net positive or a stressful thing. And so I'm finding with some other things that I'm working on that I'm saying, like, just send me a video. I promise it will be fine. I don't need to stress out other people in the room by adding somebody they don't know or don't know well into that space. So that is definitely different. But our shows are so simple that it hasn't functionally changed all that much, but emotionally, definitely different. Like, it's hugs all around when you show up at a Pandora thing. And yeah. And my hearing sucks, so wearing masks, making everybody muffled, I feel like I'm doing a weird amount of like staring and thinking and smiling and nodding, but still processing what was said and then wondering if I've nodded to the wrong thing. I know we're all doing that a little bit, but boy, my hearing is bad, and I think I'm doing it a lot.
Post-COVID, what are you looking forward to?
Oh, that's right.
It can be theater related, or it can be personal related, isn't it?
I'm looking forward to the second wave of like post-COVID excitement, right? I don't think I'm very excited for the first shows that we all do after a vaccine. Like I'm ready to figure out what our new normal is after that. Of course, I'm excited for the first show. I'm excited to like hug everyone and do a massive musical without masks on. Like that will be phenomenal and cathartic. But I do think that we've all made a lot of progress having time at home, thinking about why we do what we do. Like, why am I an independent contractor if the world could do this crazy thing? And weighing the value of that. And so I'm interested to see how we take all of those lessons into the future, and if it changes how we how much work we do and how we value the quality of the work that we do. I know that I am guilty of taking as much work as I possibly can. And I, like, pre-COVID, like, really prided myself on that hustle. And that is something that I've come to question. Like, on my desk here, I have a neon lamp that says hustle. And it was really cool before COVID. And now I question it because I've had time to think about, like, really what was it worth to squeeze all of that work into that amount of time. So I look forward to seeing how we as a collective and as a community on many levels, like a global community all the way down to like a theater community or Pandora community, how we learn from those lessons. And everybody's got different lessons that they're learning in this moment. So I'm curious to see how that informs our attitudes, our work, and all the way down to like show selection. You know, I'm curious to see what a season looks like once we're over the celebration of like we can get back together. That's the obvious and exciting first step. Like that first show is like, how many people can we all sing together with in one show and sell all the tickets? We'll have so much fun. We'll do that. And then that next season, I'm really curious about.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah, I say that I'm curious, and I'm talking to the person who will select that season.
That's right.
So not to lay on that pressure, but
No pressure.
I'm interested to see what those stories are.
Yeah, yeah. Jesse, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I know our audience is going to be excited to get to know you. Um, and this has been fun. It's always
Yeah.
fun to just sit and chat. Jesse was very, very helpful. He always is and always goes the extra mile. But for buyer and seller, he was especially helpful with the projector and the projections for this show, which I have as much technical ability as I need to be dangerous about it. So I was able to hang the projectors and sort of get them positioned right, but Jesse was instrumental in making sure that they were ultimately correct. So I'm appreciative of that too. And I just want you to know that your extra work does not go unnoticed, and I want our audience to know about it too.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. This is wonderful. Talking about all this work is great.
I know it's fun. Yeah. It's the kind of stuff that we don't get to do right now because of COVID, is we don't actually take the time to do it.
There's no lingering in small conversations now. That's part of that, like, feeling weird earlier. We're done. We don't have to be here. I feel obligated to leave.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, Jesse. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.